Good morning. As you can see, today we are going to be solving equations with variables on both sides with fractional coefficients. Yesterday we worked on writing the equations. Today we're going to solve the problems that have fractional coefficients. And so when I say fractional coefficients or even fractional constants, what we're going to talk about here is my personal favorite way of solving these problems is like I call it kill the fraction, kill the fraction. I like to eliminate fractions before I begin because I like to work with whole numbers. So I noticed that in this problem, I have thirds and I have sixes. And I can't add thirds and sixes until they are all the same size. And so what I like to do is I like to multiply everything on both sides of the equations by something that will make these into whole numbers. So I want to think of a number. This is what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of a number that can be divided both by 3 and by 6. What number can be divided both by 3 and by 6? Now, you may have come up with a lot of numbers. 6 can be divided by both 3 and 6. 12 can be divided by both 3 and 6. 18 can be divided by both 3 and 6. I like the least common multiple, and so I'm going to choose 6. Any multiple that can be divided by both of them will work, but my personal favorite way of doing this is to multiply everything by the smallest number, the least common multiple that will be divisible by both 3 and 6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up and I'm going to say multiply everything on this side by 6 and multiply everything on this side by 6. And I'm going to do my work over here and keep it neat. When you're doing this work, I highly recommend you do this on a whiteboard, you do this on paper. It is not easy to do it right on the computer. Take a picture and insert it in here if you're doing it at home. If you're doing it in class, we are going to do this work in our books. And so you don't have to worry about doing this here on the computer. You're going to do it in your books. But if you are at home working on this, you can take a picture of your work and submit that. To take a picture of your work and submit it, you're going to go insert image from camera, and that will pull up a camera and it will let you take a picture of your work. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I need to distribute this 6. 6 multiplied by 2/3 x. I need to multiply 6 times -1. See how I'm multiplying it here and I'm multiplying it here. I'm distributing. I'm also going to multiply 6 times the 9. And I'm also going to multiply 6 times the -1/6. All right, so I'm distributing 6 times everything. Now, I find that it's easier to do my whole numbers first. So if 6 is multiplied by a whole number, I'm just going to leave it as a whole number, an integer. 6 times 9 is 54. 6 times -1 is -6. Now, if I am multiplying by a fraction, for me, it is easier to turn 6 into a fraction. How do I turn 6 into a fraction? Well, I divide it by 1. So personally, that's how I'm going to do it. You can do it however you want. 6 times 2 is 12. 1 times 3 is 3. That's 12/3, which simplifies to 4. X. Now, if you are clever and you knew that you could simplify before you multiply, you knew that 6 was 2 times 3, and you could simplify 3 divided by 3 as 1, then you could have just done 2 times 2 to get the 4x. That is fine. Same deal. 6 is being multiplied by the 1. It's being divided by the 6. I can, of course, turn it into a fraction. 6 times -1 is -6. 1 times 6 is 6. And that equals -1. If you were clever, you might have thought 6 divided by 6 is 1, Miss Ayers. So I could have just made those into a 1 first, and 1 times -1 is -1. Now, this did have an x on it. I forgot to write that, so I do need to make sure I write that. And so now I'm just going to rewrite my problem using my new simplified values. So I'm going to replace 2/3 x, 6 sets of 2/3. 6 sets of 2/3 is 4x. 6 sets of -1 was -6. 6 sets of 9 was 54. And 6 sets of -1/6 was -1x. And now I have an equation with variables on both sides that looks like it has integer values, and it is much easier to solve. And I'm going to follow the steps that I used yesterday. I like to collect all of my variable terms on the side where I have more variables, and I like to collect my constants on the other side. So the opposite of -1x is +1x. That'll give me a 0 pair, so I'm going to bring my 0 pair, or I'm going to bring the -1x over here to balance. That's a 0 pair. Bring down my 54. Bring down my -6, combine 4x plus 1x gives me 5x. Now, what am I going to do? Right, I'm trying to isolate this variable, so I'm going to create a zero pair here. The opposite of -6 is +6. That gives me a zero pair. Of course, what I do to one side of the equation for balance, I must do to the other side of the equation. It's starting to come together. I'm bringing my 5x down here. 54 added to 6 gives me 60. Oh, I love when they work out so neatly. They might not always. You might end up with a fractional value as your answer. But in this case, I'm going to say, well, I have 5 multiplied by something gives me 60. If you know what it is, you can just write that down. But if you weren't, of course, you can use the inverse operation of multiplication is division. 5 divided by 5 gives me 1 to isolate the variable. 60 divided by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 1 times x by the identity property of multiplication, which states that 1 times anything equals itself. Tells me 1 times x is going to be x. And 60 divided by 5 is 12. And I have my solution, x equals 12. I always want to simplify it. If I'm thinking 2/3 of 12, if I've got 12 and I'm breaking it up into three parts, each one of those is 4. So 2/3 of 12 is 8. So if I'm thinking about it, this is 8 minus 1 on this side. 8 minus 1 gives me a value of 7. And I have 9 minus 1/6 of x. If I have x is 12 and I'm breaking it into sixths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Each one of them is going to be 2. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. That's why this worked as well. If I'm breaking up into thirds, 4, 8, 12. Now I'm looking that I have one of those sixths. So I have 2. 9 minus 1/6 of x, 9 minus 2, also equals 7. And since 7 is equal to 7, I know I solved it correctly. All right, that's the steps that we're going to follow on each problem. First step, eliminate your fractions. I like to say kill the fraction by multiplying by the least common multiple. Second step, collect all of your variable terms on one side of the equation. Third step, collect all of your constant terms on the other side of the equation to isolate the variable. Third step, divide by any coefficients if possible or necessary, and find your solution and check it. All right, have a great day.